Jake's scarred face caught the barber's cold stare. Then the scissors dropped. Silence slammed the room as a war hero was told, "I won't touch you." The rejection cut deeper than any wound. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jake Reynolds' footsteps echoed down the cracked sidewalk as he left Miller's barber shop, each step heavier than the last. The heat from the afternoon sun pressed against his back, but the cold sting in his chest cut deeper than any flame ever had. His burn scars, jagged and raw, were reminders of a battlefield most people couldn't fathom. Yet here in his own town, those marks seemed to alienate him more than anything he faced overseas. The barbershop door slammed behind him like the final chapter of a story he never wanted to read. He had imagined this moment differently. After the horrors endured, the endless firefights, the nights of endless vigilance, Jake craved normalcy, something as ordinary as a haircut. He wanted to look in a mirror and see a man not defined by pain or war, but by a simple act of care, a fresh start. Yet what he got instead was the sharp, dismissive edge of rejection. The memory of Sam Miller's words churned relentlessly in his mind. "I don't do work like this." Just like that, a veteran was reduced to an inconvenience. A living testament to survival was shoved aside because his face didn't fit a narrow idea of style. It wasn't just about hair, it was about dignity, respect, and recognition. Jake's throat tightened with bitterness. How could someone whose hands shaped the community's everyday appearances wield such cruelty disguised as professionalism? Jake's pulse hammered, not from exertion, but from anger laced with aching hurt. His scars, the maps of his sacrifices, were supposed to be marks of honor, not social exile. The war had ended months ago, but the battle for acceptance waged on in quiet, devastating ways. He had fought for his country, for his brothers in arms, and now he fought for the simple right to be seen as whole. Word spread quickly among the veteran circles. They knew Sam Miller, not just as a barber, but as a man who should understand sacrifice. The veterans gathered in whispers and clenched fists. The refusal wasn't merely a slight against Jake, but an affront to everyone who bore invisible wounds beneath their own skin. How could a town that prided itself on supporting its heroes turn its back over something so petty? Jake's mind replayed the moment he tried to explain, voice steady but heavy with vulnerability. "I'm a veteran. I've earned the right to sit here." But Sam's eyes held nothing but cold resolve. The message was clear. Jake's scars made him less worthy, less deserving of kindness or care. The betrayal cut deeper than any grenade blast ever had. That evening, alone in his small apartment, Jake stared at his reflection, tracing the uneven texture of his scars with trembling fingers. The physical pain had dulled over time, replaced by a gnawing ache of isolation. What was left after sacrifice, if not recognition? If the world you fought for could not honor you in the simplest of ways, what did that say about the price of survival? Anger simmered beneath his skin, raw, unyielding. But alongside it grew a painful realization. This refusal was more than one man's prejudice. It was a mirror reflecting a fractured society. Veterans were revered in speeches and parades, but shunned in the quiet moments that defined real life. Jake's fight was no longer on foreign soil. It was right here, in his hometown, against indifference cloaked as normalcy. The rejection wasn't just a haircut denied. It was a declaration that scars, visible or not, were inconvenient to a community eager to forget. And Jake Reynolds was determined that they would remember. The morning air thrummed with a low, persistent growl, motorcycles rolling in waves down Main Street, their engines vibrating through the pavement and shaking the windows of every shopfront. It was a sound charged with purpose, an unspoken declaration of defiance and solidarity that echoed beyond mere noise. Veterans poured into town from every direction, faces etched with hard-won scars, eyes shadowed by memories invisible to the untrained gaze, bodies carrying the weight of battles both seen and unseen. They came not just for a haircut, but to reclaim dignity, to weave a thread of respect through the fabric of a community that had so quickly forgotten what sacrifice truly meant. Miller's barber shop, once a quiet neighborhood fixture, now bristled with energy, overflowing with the weight of history and hurt. Every chair was occupied. Every barber wielded clippers and scissors with a solemn precision born from the gravity of the moment. The air was thick with tension, each snip of hair a small hammer strike forging a new symbol of recognition and honor. The scent of aftershave mingled with sweat and leather jackets, the room pulsing with the rhythm of engines outside and whispered conversations inside. Sam Miller stood behind his counter, the familiar weight of his shears suddenly foreign in his hands. His usual confident demeanor faltered beneath the unrelenting gaze of a crowd united by a cause far greater than haircuts or style. The faces staring back at him were not just customers. They were brothers and sisters in arms, living testaments to the harsh truths of sacrifice. Sam's pride and stubbornness collided with a rising tide of accountability. The refusal yesterday had set something in motion, a reckoning that demanded more than apologies. Amid the crowd, Captain Mark Dalton moved with quiet authority. His presence commanded respect, not by loud words, but by the calm steadiness that years of leadership had carved into his features. Mark had fought beside Jake in countless operations. He knew the language of scars better than most. When he stepped forward to speak, his voice was low but clear, cutting through the hum of activity. "We wear these scars for our country," Mark said, eyes locking with Sam's. "They're not blemishes. They're stories. Stories of sacrifice, brotherhood, and survival. What you do here isn't just cutting hair. You're honoring lives." Those words settled over the room like a solemn prayer. Sam swallowed hard, the stubborn wall he'd built around his pride crumbling beneath the weight of undeniable truth. He lifted his scissors again, this time with reverence. Each cut was careful, deliberate, a silent apology stitched into the very act of care. His hands moved with newfound respect, shaping more than hair. They were shaping healing, bridging divides with the rhythm of steel against skin. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Where rejection had hung heavy just hours before, now reverence filled every corner. Conversation softened, nods exchanged. A collective heartbeat thrummed in time with the buzz of clippers. Veterans shared quiet smiles, eyes flickering with the unspoken acknowledgement that they were seen, honored, and valued. Jake sat in a chair, the focus of the day's attention, but also a symbol. His scars catching the light, no longer marks of exclusion, but badges of pride worn openly and without apology. By the time the sun dipped low, casting a warm amber glow through the barbershop windows, Miller's was no longer just a place to trim hair. It had become a sanctuary, a beacon of restored respect. The community had spoken with unmistakable clarity. Honor those who serve, scars and all. And in that moment, Jake's scars did not separate him. They united them all. Weeks had passed, but the ripple from that day's roar of motorcycles had not diminished. It had swelled, transforming Miller's barbershop into something far greater than a neighborhood fixture. The scent of antiseptic and aftershave was now laced with purpose. Posters for veteran events pinned to the walls, schedules of support meetings neatly tacked beside the old-fashioned mirrors. The once quiet, routine hum of clippers had grown into a steady, vibrant heartbeat of a community reborn. Veterans became regulars, men and women who bore the visible marks of war, and others carrying invisible burdens, found sanctuary in the shop's worn leather chairs. The scars Jake carried, those raw, jagged lines etched deep into his skin, were no longer barriers but emblems of survival, courage carved in flesh and spirit. In this space, those marks were met with nods of respect rather than averted eyes. Free haircuts were offered without question to any service member carrying wounds, visible or unseen, as the shop embraced a mission that transcended commerce. Sam Miller, once a man proud in his skill yet rigid in his judgments, had undergone a profound shift. He volunteered tirelessly at veteran events, his earlier refusal haunting him, but now fueling his commitment. The stoic barber, whose hands had hesitated before, now wielded his scissors with deliberate care, each snip an act of atonement. The community had forced him to confront his own biases, his discomfort peeled away by the resilience of those who served. Humility had settled into his bones, grounding him as he listened to stories he'd never heard, stories of loss and valor that transformed his understanding of what it meant to serve. Jake Reynolds, once isolated by rejection, became a beacon of hope and strength. His role evolved from mere survivor to organizer and advocate. He helped form a local veteran support group, a collective forged from shared pain and hope, offering a lifeline to those still struggling with the invisible scars of war. His face, once a source of shame and alienation, now reflected a quiet pride, a testimony to survival and resilience. The community had not only accepted him, but was learning to honor the complexity of courage itself. The town, forced to confront its prejudices, grew stronger, more compassionate. What had begun as a moment of anger and pain rippled outward into a movement of change. The refusal that once cut like a blade had ignited a spark, a reminder that true honor lies not in flawless appearances, but in courage, in respect, and in the willingness to stand with those who bear the weight of sacrifice. Jake's story became more than his own. It was a narrative woven into the community's fabric, inspiring others to look beyond surface scars and see the strength beneath. It proved bédesoured that the deepest wounds, when met with empathy and understanding, could lead to new beginnings, transformations that were not just personal, but communal. In the quiet moments between the buzz of clippers and the steady murmur of conversation, Miller's barbershop stood as a testament. Every chair filled was more than a haircut. It was justice served, a community healed, and a hero celebrated. The scars that once marked division now marked unity, and in that transformation lay the true victory.